You're listening to the PJF Podcast, a show dedicated to decoding elite sports performance and fitness. I'm Paul Fabritz, and I'm an MBA strength and conditioning and performance trainer. If you want to become superhuman, take your fitness, and take your sports performance to the next level, this is the podcast for you. Let's do it.
What's up, my squids? Welcome to episode 48 of the podcast. It's been a busy summer. I haven't been able to do many solo podcasts. Put out one podcast last week with Ben Bruno. If you haven't checked that out, go check that out. That was a really good one for trainers or for anybody like getting into training because he has a pretty interesting story. But yeah, I've had a crazy busy summer, so I haven't had much time to do podcasts. Now the NBA season's starting back up, you got your boy back. So even though I don't really have a lot of time to do these podcasts anyways, I'm actually way too busy to be running a podcast. I got to do it. I got to keep the squids fed, man. The squids got to eat somehow, some way. And this is the only way they can eat right now. So I got to keep feeding them. Also, let me know whatever questions you guys have. Put them in the YouTube comments because that actually helps me crank through podcasts faster if I can just go direct to the source. I'm here to help you guys. So I want to know what you want to learn. I don't want to rant about stuff that I'm interested in that you guys don't actually care about in the first place. Let's get into today's topic. So before I get to Q&As, I want to talk about this recent study that I read. And I think this is something that we've discussed on the podcast before, but I want to really dive into this because this study was really interesting. So the study's name, it's a 2021 study. It's called Consolidation of Human Skill Linked to Waking Hippocampo Neocortical Replay. And you're like, okay, that's ridiculous. What the heck does that mean? Let's break that down. So essentially, there's like a 2001 study that I read on rats. And basically what they showed is during REM sleep is where skill consolidation happens. So the rats practice, they went through this maze, right? And then when they sleep, that's when skill consolidation happened. So AKA, when you hear somebody say skill consolidation, you can think about like cementing in the brain. So you're cementing the skill that you just worked on that day. So for a long time, researchers, practitioners thought that it's all about sleep. And that's still true. Sleep is still extremely important for motor learning. But what this study and a few other studies are starting to show is that wakeful rest is just as important. So they're calling these offline gains, right? This isn't happening while I'm practicing. The gains aren't happening while I'm practicing. They happen in that reflection period right after. So when I get these short rest periods in between my bouts of working out, that's where a lot of the cementing of that skill actually occurs. So essentially what they did for this study is they put these MEG, like these brain scans, on the subjects, and then they had them learn this typing test. And they had all these different groups, but the group that performed the best wasn't the continuous straight through group. It was the group that did 10 seconds of practice followed by 10 seconds of rest. 10 seconds of practice followed by 10 seconds of rest. And the reason that group performed the best is because they observed that the replay is temporally compressed by approximately 20-fold relative to the acquired skill, is selective for the trained sequence, and predicts the magnitude of skill consolidation. So basically what that means is I'm going out, I'm learning a move. After I learn that move, my brain is compressing that skill and replaying at 20 times the speed. So I think they said it was like 24 replays in 10 seconds. Here's a quote from the lead researcher. The same amount of practice results in significantly different skill depending on the presence or absence of waking rest within the training schedule, a phenomena termed the spacing effect. Consolidation of skill is superior when frequent rest periods are interspersed with practice blocks, distributed practice, than when the same total amount of practice is performed over longer continuous blocks, aka massed practice. So the presence of waking rest interweaved with practice is a crucial determinant of skill memory consolidation. All right, so that takes me to the three takeaways here. 1, allow frequent breaks. So often in like shooting, you're improving your shooting mechanics, and it's just like, it's a numbers game. It's how fast can the rebounder get it to me? Or you're on a gun, you're on the shooting gun, you got 2-3 basketballs in there, and as soon as you shoot, that next one's coming. You're not leaving your brain any time to then reflect on that last shot. Now, if you are going to go with those bursts of like, boom, 5 quick shots in a row, you would then want to take an equal break. So if those 5 shots took me, 15 seconds, I would then want to take a break for at least 15 seconds. And ideally, maybe even more sometimes. You might even go 15 seconds on, 30 seconds off. So I think it can be pretty harmful to do those like shooting workouts where it's just so fast and the brain has no time to be like, relax, compress at 20 times speed. The other thing is taking longer rest periods. So if you are going hard in a drill or you're learning to move, whatever, you want to then at some point give them their 1 minute, 2 minutes off. And during that period, I think this is what matters the most. You need to be in almost a meditative state, because what a lot of people do is they just go grab their phones. So you're trying to replay that skill at 20 times. This is where the magic is happening. And then you go grab your phone and completely distract your brain. We just ruined everything that we just did. And the other thing that people do is conversations. So you finish the drill. During your rest period, strike up a conversation with somebody else in the gym. Again, your brain was working at 20 times speed. It's doing this beautiful, beautiful thing to cement what you just did in the brain. And then you run it with a conversation. So I think, you get done and you go grab your water and you walk, you need to be in like this meditative state, walk away, let your brain be free. You don't need to consciously like really overthink the skill that you just did. I think if you just allow your mind to be free and don't let it be distracted, I think at the subconscious level, that skill that you just practiced is really going to set in to a much higher degree. Now, I know a lot of coaches and trainers don't want to take any breaks because they're like, well, I want to get up 500 shots. I would rather see somebody get 300, 350 and have some breaks in there where they can reflect on what they're actually doing. My buddy Max Schmarzo, my partner for EdU, talks about how he thinks that shooting by yourself is actually more beneficial sometimes than shooting with a partner, even if you get a little less reps. And he talked about it from the standpoint of like, if you're in the corner and you miss long, you got to go chase that ball. So there's a little more pressure on each shot. Maybe that increases arousal, that increases focus. But I look at that from the standpoint of wakeful rest, offline learning. I think you shoot and then you have 10, 15 seconds before your next shot because you got to go grab your next rebound, come back out to the 3-point line. So I think you're consolidating that skill that you just did from that last shot. And I actually have intuitively felt this before I've thought about any of these mechanisms. I always felt like shooting by myself on a court did help more than like a shooting gun workout where I got up like 500 reps. And I think that can still be valuable for sure, but there's something to being out on a court by yourself, having the visualization, having time to visualize a game scenario. Imagination is a huge thing for motor learning. This is what the motor learning scientists can't study when they say 1-on-0 work doesn't translate as well. You can't separate perception action. They don't actually account for high-level players who really have a high-level imagination, right? So that's not really 1-on-0 training because in your mind, you're out there really playing against somebody. But I feel like being out on a court by yourself can be beneficial from that standpoint and also from the standpoint of just having longer breaks in between each shot. And then the other thing I want to mention, I was reading some studies about cardio after learning and how that actually enhances that learning session. Now, I don't know how this applies to a basketball player because we're learning while doing cardio. But let's say you're doing a walkthrough, a practice, where you're learning plays. Probably the best thing you could do is end that practice getting up and down, running, get a good sweat. That's important for like blood flow to the brain. And I don't know the other mechanisms of why that works. But this recent study showed really good results on cardio right after a learning session. And this is especially true of, your math homework, or you went out and you're in school and you learned something. It's really good to then go do some cardio afterwards. And I know resistance training can show good results as well, but these particular studies are focused on cardio. So as soon as you learn something, go do some cardio. Make sure that when you're learning something, you take these little brain breaks. This isn't just for basketball. Like with your math homework, if you just bury your head in the book and you just go as fast as you can, you're not going to learn it as well. But if you go and then you let your brain breathe a little bit and then, reflect, and your brain starts to go, oh, this problem was a lot like this last problem, but this variable was switched up. And this is really where it sets in and it cements in the brain compared to just like getting done and moving on to the next thing. That reflection process is everything. All right, guys, let me know if you have questions on that. Let's move on to the Q&A. So the first question I got from Instagram was, can I do 2 knee dominant lifts like a back squat and a rear foot elevated split squat in one session? So the answer to that is it depends, because some people can handle that volume, and then some people would crush themselves with that volume. The other thing is, what are your sets looking like? Because you might be able to handle 2 or 3 sets of a back squat and then 2 or 3 sets of a rear foot elevated, or you could just double down on one of those. You could say, I'm going to do 8 sets of a back squat. Maybe I'm going low rep, I'm going 3 reps. I can do 8 sets of 3. Then I probably don't need to move on to a rear foot elevated, especially because I no longer have time in that workout because I just did 8 sets. So you can double down on one of those knee dominant lifts and then you don't have to do as many. Or it also depends on personality type. Some people get really bored doing that. They need a wide variety of exercises. Then take your back squat sets down to 2 to 4. And then you still have room in your workout for rear foot elevated. Also, rear foot elevated isn't always knee dominant. Just because it's a squat pattern, people categorize it as knee dominant. The muscle that is the most sore the next day after rear foot elevated is the glutes for most people, and then adductors, even like sometimes proximal hamstring, and then probably quad. So it's not super knee dominant. So sometimes those can complement each other really well. But the other thing is, like, I personally, me at 33 years old, I wouldn't do 2 knee dominant lifts. Maybe at 20, but your recovery capacity is just much less in your 30s. And, if I spend most of my time jumping and running and cutting, doing the things that really, really matter for athleticism. So I don't have much room for 2 knee dominant lifts after I go out and I do all this jumping and playing basketball. So for me, I'm going to do 1 knee dominant lift a day, and I'll do that 2 to 3 days a week. And that's as much as I can handle. If I wanted to jump less and play less, then yeah, I could handle 2 knee dominant exercises. Shoot, I could probably handle 3. If I progress the right way, I could probably handle 4 or 5. It doesn't matter, as long as I progress the right way, but it just wouldn't be a benefit to me. It would be a waste of time. And my athleticism would be trash because I removed the thing that actually mattered, which was running, jumping, cutting, and playing sports. All right, next question. Preseason training. The team is crushing us in the weight room and on court. How much of your programs can I do? So if you're being crushed and you have no energy and you feel sore constantly, then you can't do much. But ask yourself this: what buckets are being filled and what buckets are not being filled? For example, when you go out and you play a lot of basketball, like preseason, typically people are on the court every day. What athleticism buckets does basketball fill? Well, it's extensive plyometrics. So from your program, remove extensive plyometrics. I don't need any high rep, low intensity plyos because that's what basketball is, right? Like basketball is a lot of like you operating in that, 40%, like a slow jog, 40% up to like 90% of your max, because basketball is slightly fatiguing. And so you're doing everything in these like sub-max states, but you accumulate thousands of plyometric reps throughout the game, throughout your practice, throughout your skills training. So that bucket is being filled. So you don't necessarily need more extensive plyos. Extensive plyos would be better when your on-court volume is not high, because then the extensive plyos can keep the spring load tolerance on the tendons and prepare you and gradually build you up for basketball. So I would remove that from the programs. what is not being filled? Well, intensive plyometrics sometimes is not being filled on the court. The most recent study I saw on NBA players, it was like less than 3 or 4 max jumps in a full game. I think I don't know how they equated for minutes, but I'm going to assume that was per 48. But yeah, and then imagine somebody who's only getting 10, 20 minutes a game. Like, you're probably not getting any maximal jumps. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One, if I'm going up for a layup, I'm not always jumping as high as possible. I'm jumping high enough to get the shot off. If I'm grabbing a rebound and I have space, I'm not going to jump 40 inches. I might jump 20 inches because it was high enough to grab the rebound and it conserved energy. Another reason is we don't always have space to maximally jump. So I might be getting hit, I might be boxing out and then jumping. And so if I could jump 40 inches, now I'm only jumping 20, 25 inches. Again, fatigue sets in. And so my body's trying to jump maximally, but if I jump 40 inches, now I'm only getting 30, 35 inches because of fatigue. So there's a lot of reasons why you're not going to actually achieve your full max vertical jump in a game. And same thing goes for your max speed. And part of that is, especially on court, is other than fatigue, is just the fact that the court is so small. So by the time you're actually reaching top end speed, you already got to decelerate and go the other way. You're running out of room. So those are 2 buckets that aren't always being filled on the court: max intensity plyometrics and top end sprint speed. So those are some things where it's like, before practice, as long as I'm feeling fresh, you might want to fill those buckets. And so that could be, look through the program and find out, well, okay, what's like the intense, like a depth jump would be a good example of an intensive plyo. I could do a box drop, get up, touch the rim, get up, dunk, or I could just throw. So we do these like 15-minute freestyle dunk sessions. Throw those in, when you're feeling the most bouncy. So that might be before practice, like after your warm up, or that might be after practice. Some people feel really bouncy after practice. Go throw down 5, 10, 15 dunks. And that's your intensive. Or just work it into your skills training, work it into your practice. If you're doing 3-man weave, you might say, hey, I'm allowed 10 dunks today, right? Or look at your weekly volume. I'm going to get 20 big dunks this week. And so then you split that however you want. Say we split that over 4 different practice sessions. Then I get 5 dunks today. So in 3-man weave, instead of finishing with a little layup, I'm going to throw down a hard dunk. Or I'm going to get as high as I possibly can on the layup off the left, and then I'm also going to do it off the right. So those are ways where you can just intentionally add in a little bit of intensity into practice. And then as far as like top end sprint speed, this is where it gets debatable, and I just broke this down on EdgeU. You don't need top end sprint speed in basketball, so it's not specific to the sport, but we make really good adaptations at the human level. One of the best ways to reduce the risk of hamstring injuries is be good with top-end sprinting. The fascicle lengthening, like the structure level, what we're changing, the fascicle lengthening, that's going to be the best from sprinting over everything else. Go back a few episodes to our flexibility mobility talk, where I'm talking about how there's different reflexes that govern slow speed stretching versus high speed muscle lengthening. Entirely different reflexes. And so you're going to override or desensitize a stretch reflex when you do flexibility training at slow speeds. So you get flexible as a human, like in slow speeds, but those same stretch reflexes are not what's limiting you at high speeds. So if I want big hip range of motion when I'm sprinting, when I'm accelerating, when I'm jumping, if I want ankle mobility when I'm accelerating on a drive, like, you have to expose your body to fast speeds. And sprinting is one of the best ways to do this because it's high level lengthening, like the hamstrings are going through a long muscle length. The hips are going through really big ranges of motion. We're getting dissociation between the thighs. So it is a flexibility exercise, and it's done at the highest possible speeds. There's nothing higher speed that we could possibly do. And so then you're desensitizing other protective mechanisms. And so think about it like this. you got these reflexes and these protective mechanisms that are essentially going to lead to increased co-contractions around the joint. So think about if you had a piano falling on your head, you wouldn't be like chill, like relax, waiting for that piano to fall. You would like brace, right? Well, hopefully you run, but if it's too late, you would brace and you would stiffen up and you would co-contract around the joints. And that's kind of like what you do when, even if you're really flexible as a human, you can be a stiff mover as soon as you introduce speeds, because you have, well, there's lots of reasons, but one of the reasons is you have these protective mechanisms that's kind of locking up your body because you don't feel safe. So every step when you're sprinting, it's like there's a piano falling on your head and you have this excess tension in the body. The only way to get rid of that is graded exposure, gradually increasing speed over a big range of motion, working your way into faster running, and eventually sprinting. It's the only way it can happen. And so that's why I like sprint drills. I don't do sprint drills, these dribbles and all these different A skip, B skip, whatever. I don't do these for sprint mechanics. I don't think it can do that much, other than in maybe beginner athletes. I don't think it does that much for sprint mechanics. But what it does do is it can kind of provide like a higher speed mobility workout. And some people aren't ready to go out and do top end sprinting. And these sprint drills is like graded exposure to gradually get you there. So we do a lot of these in the speed code and in durability code as well. So that's a good starting place, and then gradually working your way up to sprinting. But I don't have every basketball player do a ton of top end sprinting because some of them just aren't very good at it. That's not a great place to go build coordination. Like, it's super dangerous if you have bad sprint mechanics. You have big backside mechanics. Pelvis is tipped forward, head is way out in front of the body. Obviously, in acceleration, that's a little different. But when you have big backside mechanics, especially at top end speed, that's when the strain on the hamstring goes through the roof. And so that's where we have the hamstring injuries. So it's just not worth the risk, especially because they're not going to go out and have to do that specific task in the sport. Whereas like football players, track athletes, most of them are pretty good top end sprinters because it's built into their sport. So they've been doing this ever since they were little kids on a weekly basis. So every basketball player, I'm always looking at their mechanics and I'm assessing, is this worth the risk? If it's not worth the risk to sprint, I'm just going to build them up through sprint drills and then gradually increase. We'll start with short accelerations or resisted work, because you can't reach top end sprint speed with, resistance, or, 10-yard accelerations. These are the safer things. And then we gradually will increase that distance as long as their sprint mechanics look good enough. But sometimes we get somebody who is a good sprinter, and then we're going to do stuff like flying 10s, where I'm gradually building up, and then over 10 yards, I start at like an 80% sprint, and then the next rep I can go to a 90% sprint, and then get them up eventually to a 100% sprint. And now you're achieving true top end sprint speed. And again, we're looking for general adaptations, fascicle lengthening, increased range of motion at high speeds, increased ankle stiffness because it's one of the highest force tasks in the shortest ground contact, like 0.1 seconds of ground contact time with all this force. That's so great for the ankle. And some of these general traits can eventually transfer over to stuff like single leg jumping. Not directly, but you're building some of the underlying qualities that the body needs to later on transfer to the court, as long as we go put in enough specific work there. Now, I know some of you guys are bored out of your mind because this is something that I've talked about a lot on the podcast, but not all training has to be highly specific. Just like the same reason we go in the weight room, we lift weights. You're not going to lift weights in a game, but we're building the structure. We're building some general strength, which later on can be transferred over. So that's the idea of why we would fill that bucket, because the court doesn't fill it. Now, what else is the court filling? What other bucket are we filling? We're filling the conditioning bucket. If you're playing every day, that's the best form of conditioning. So we can't handle that much more conditioning. Maybe after practice, you do some end-to-end sprints, or maybe you do some full court one-on-one. That's one of my favorite conditioning drills. Full court one-on-one will get you in such good shape. But you might not be able to handle that additional impact depending on how hard you guys actually go in practice. and how often you're playing. Resistance training is not a bucket that is being filled, so we can still get a lot of our general strength. I could still go hit my full body lifts. This stuff becomes even more important in this period where we're getting almost all of our athleticism work, plyos, agility, we're getting all of that on the court. But in the weight room, I can go in, hit my full body lifts, tissue tolerance. We need some armor, right? A lot of times people start to lose muscle mass in that preseason or especially in season just because of how much cardio they're doing. And so if I have adequate calories and I have high protein and I keep resistance training present, even if it's just 3 days a week, that can go a long way with maintaining muscle mass, which is really going to matter later on in season, because most of us are going to lose a little bit of muscle throughout a long season, but we got to do the best we can to maintain it. All right, so that ended up being a long answer for that one. But yeah, essentially, what buckets are you filling? What are you not filling? And then fill the ones that are not currently being filled on the court. How do you deal with online negativity? So we talked about this in the Ben Bruno podcast a little bit, but you just got to know it's coming. I feel like I don't get a lot of online negativity, but if I have a post that's going to go viral on the Explore page, I already know I'm going to get a lot of hate because there's going to be new people that have never seen my stuff. So they don't know that they might not even understand that there's a science to training or a science to basketball. They're coming in blind, so they're looking for ways to hate. They just don't understand it. The people that already follow me, especially if you've followed for some years, you've probably built up more of a trust over time, and you understand that there's a science. You understand that I'm going to break this down to the smallest details. But people coming from the Random Explore page, coming in blind, they're always going to have something to say. But you look at it and you go, okay, well, if a post got 100 comments and there was one hater, that's 1% of people that hated this post. That's a really good ratio. So that's not really hate. You should expect a few people. You should expect 1 to 10% of haters on each post. If you didn't have any haters, then you're probably not putting out any unique ideas because people aren't pushing back at all. So just know that it's coming, and just know that the internet is ruthless. And then you gotta get good at posting and ghosting. And it's tough because I want to read every comment because I like to see what people are saying and the feedback and stuff. But most of the time I have to post and ghost. I just can't read the comments. I'll respond to as many comments as I can in the first 30 minutes. And then after that, I just can't go back and keep checking the comments throughout the day because it's that one negative comment that's just going to stick with you in the back of your mind. Even though it's not a big deal, it's still just going to be there. It's going to be like this little chirping thing in the back of your mind. It becomes, for some people, that negativity becomes like the soundtrack of their life. And their life just spirals. They just get in a really dark place. So one thing I do is I started using the favorites on Instagram. That is the best feature that they came out with, because there are experts who are actually sharing high-level information on social media. We can't really afford to miss that. So, highlights. There's a lot of great highlight pages that I see a highlight where I learned something from, or I saved it. I want to use this highlight as a breakdown. I can't afford to miss that. So I have to go on social media. But normally when I go on, I got to scroll through all this terrible, terrible information to get to any good information. And that just bothers me. It can potentially ruin my whole day seeing misinformation from on a trainer's post. This stuff really gets to me. But the favorites, you can essentially just favorite your top pages, and then you go straight to the favorites, and you can see the trainers you want to see, and you see the highlights you want to see. And I'll have a couple comedy pages, make me laugh, things that make me feel good. What pages make me feel good or make me laugh or allow me to learn something? And then outside of that, I just can't keep up with everything. And I know I'm going to miss out on some stuff. I know by not going to the Explore page, I might miss out on some expert that is putting out good information. And that's a loss I have to take for my mental health. So that is a big thing. is narrowing down the people that you're listening to, the content that you're consuming, and get off that dang Explore page. The Explore page ruins people. Next one, dunk every day. I've answered this one a lot, but essentially, if your only goal is dunking, then yeah, dunking as much as possible while staying as healthy as possible is the most important thing. Some people, that volume means 2 days a week. Some people, that means 3 days a week. Some people can build up to the point where they do dunk every day. Some of the best dunkers ever got to the point where they dunk every single day. But what a good trainer does is they get somebody to their goal. So you say you're a basketball player. You're not a pro dunker. You're a basketball player. Your goal is to dunk, though. A good trainer gets you to that goal. They gradually ramp you up into the point where you can go out and practice dunking as much as possible, and because of that, you improve the skill of dunking, and you reach your end goal of dunking. I've helped enough people dunk to understand that it does not transform your basketball career. It does very, 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 very little. And so a good trainer gets you to your goal. A great trainer helps you refine your goals. So if I have a basketball player who says, my only goal is dunking, I'm going to start asking some questions. I'm going to start saying, well, don't you feel like it would be beneficial if you had a more explosive first step and you could get in the lane more often? Because if you got in the lane, you could score more points. You could dish out to teammates. You can create. And they go, oh yeah. Like that would be really beneficial. And I go, hey, have you ever seen like Luka and James Harden, how they decelerate and the defender just keeps going while they stop on a dime and all of a sudden they have all this room for open shots? Do you think that would be beneficial? And they're like, yeah, that would be huge. And I start breaking it down to the point where they realize, oh, okay, overall athleticism is what actually matters. I want to jump higher to score more points. I want to get faster to create more opportunities for myself and teammates. Dunking is a vertex. It's a measurement of our overall athleticism training. It should be a byproduct of that for a basketball player. So yeah, like we could get you to your goals by just going out and dunking, but practicing dunking is kind of a dead-end skill. Meaning when you improve your dunking by just going out and practicing dunking, it doesn't make you a better accelerator. It doesn't make you a better decelerator. It doesn't improve your agility. And it certainly doesn't improve your skill. It actually potentially could decline. It could decrease your skill because you're giving your knees to this. This task is what gets your knees. This task is what gets your energy. This task is what gets your time. So how do I have time to put in work on my skills? How do I have time? How do I still got juice left over in my knees to go do a small-sided game, which is where I would transform my skill? And so you got to do the things that actually matter. Small-sided games, skills training, strength and conditioning, improving overall athleticism. Whatever's left over, yeah, go practice dunking. But dunking is a relatively dead-end skill. And you can look at a lot of pro dunkers and watch them play basketball. They're not all athletic. There's a few who are athletic in games because they actually play a lot of basketball too. Chris Staples is one guy that comes to mind. He's very athletic as a hooper. He's super fast. He's got a good first step. He's got spring to his step. He's got pop. But a lot of pro dunkers I see, they're actually pretty slow. They actually have sloppy ground contact times, poor change of direction. And then every now and then they'll catch their big dunk. But that doesn't make you better as a player, right? Even the 4 points that they scored off dunks could have been some sort of layup, right? If you're athletic enough to get up there, you could have just finished with a layup. So don't automatically assume that because you're dunking or if you get to that end goal of dunking that you're going to become a better player. That's just not true. So keep your priorities in check. And remember, a good trainer helps you get to those goals. A great trainer helps you refine those goals because they know, hey, we've done this enough to know that if I help you get to your goal, that's a dead end. You're not going to get anywhere even if I get you to your goal. All right, guys, that is a wrap for today. Let me know your questions for our next solo podcast. Drop them in the YouTube comments. Also, if you can, leave us a rating and review on whatever platform you're on. If you're on Apple Podcasts, it really helps if you can leave us a rating and review. Make sure that you guys check out pjfperformance.com. It used to be pjfperformance.net. We switched it over. PJFperformance.com. We got durability code, we got vert code, we got Mac McClung program, we got speed code. We got a program for basically anybody. I'm also working on a really big thing that I'm not going to talk about yet, just because I'm going to get too many questions on it. Also, since the last time we talked, we now have our extended length fabric bands. And these bands are unbelievable. You can do a lot of jump work with it. You can do a lot of agility work with it because they're really long. They're 6 feet long. So you no longer have to tie two bands together. And these things really just don't rip. Normal bands, you never know when that thing's going to rip. But this, I mean, it's insanely durable. The gray ones are the best for upper body. I can do an entire upper body workout with these gray bands. The black ones are good for like jump work, lower body, although the gray bands can do that as well. But you can find those on Amazon Prime. So it's 1 day shipping. And eventually we're going to try to get that to ship international. I know that's a question I get a lot. Also, we have Upper Echelon. Make sure that you check out Upper Echelon Nutrition. We're back in stock. We sold out big time on everything, but we're back in stock on our whey protein, on our collagen, which is our two most popular supplements. And then we have the creatine as well, the sleep support, and now we have a healthy pre-workout as well. All right, guys, until next time, I'm out.